Hey guys, I'm circling back to more off-road trade-off discussions, and these are based off of a lot of discussions I have with you here in the comments, in direct messages on Instagram, emails I get on my website TahoeOverlanding.com, instant chat at the website TahoeOverlanding.com, and this one comes up a lot, and for some reason the last couple of months it's been coming up a lot more, and that is re-gearing, gear ratios. But let's talk about some of the negatives. This is one that, the negative to going shorter really is that when you go shorter, a gear reduction, like think about a bicycle or a motorcycle, to get a shorter gear ratio, you have a smaller drive sprocket and a larger drive-in sprocket. So fewer teeth, more teeth. And in order to accomplish that on a ring and pinion situation, the pinion gets smaller. The number of teeth gets smaller and smaller. And the number of teeth on a taller ratio, it gets bigger and bigger. So let's take a look at this. Okay, so both of these pinions are from a Dana 44. Now, you may notice a slightly different shank because this is from a True 44 and this is from a Jeep Rubicon 44. That's another discussion for another day, but basically the teeth cut is the same for all 44s. If you take a look at these two pinions, that's a 488. That's a Yukon 488. This is a factory Dana Spicer 307. Look how much smaller this thing is. So let's look at it straight on. Okay, that big and that big. I mean, look at that thing. This thing is beefy. The teeth, you have just more beef to the actual pinion than you do, on the 488. So it gets smaller. And that load of each driven tooth is now being transferred. So you can see from center, there's all this meat here that the load is being transferred into, the actual mass of the gear. And a smaller one, you just have less mass of, because at any given time, you have at least two or actually about three teeth contacting the ring gear at different points. And so all that load is just transferred into a much smaller mass. So it's just focusing the force right here, and there's just less strength. So it's more focused and less strength, less focused, more strength. And the reason when you hear people that are having failures of like ring and pinions in, say, a Dana 44 or even a Dana 60, it's because they've got a gear ratio that is super deep. Past 5, okay? They're 513. They're 538. I promise. It's the guys that are being very extreme. So they got giant tires, huge loads, usually fair amounts of horsepower, usually pretty extreme off-roading where they're really binding up axles and everything, and they're putting all that through a tiny little pinion. If you're going to making a comparison, the Dana 60 versus Dana 44, make an accurate comparison. Compare a Dana 44 with the right ratio. You're going to have a pretty stout differential if you don't have 538s in your Dana 44. Now, I will bring up that as the pinion gets smaller, the ring gear gets thicker, okay? But not anywhere that makes any difference. Okay, so here's the Yukon 488 ring gear. It gets thicker back here, okay? You can see it gets thicker on the mounting side. I have the 307 somewhere, but it's not even worth comparing. It gets thicker this way to bring the ring gear this way. The teeth don't get any bigger, and you're not really wanting for material, no matter what the ratio is here. There's plenty of material there. So it's not as big of a deal to worry about this as it is the pinion. I think it's worth noting that if you're going to go deep, if you're going to go short, you are going to weaken your pinion. But for what we're doing, you're not going to find enough weakness. 488s, even 513, you're probably not going to have any real problems. Not doing what we're doing here with the Tahoe Overlanding axle swap. I'll also say that the reason why the pinion is what gets the smallest more than the ring gear is because the ring gear is pretty well set. The ring gear diameter is not really able to change because it goes around a carrier. It bolts to a carrier, so you can't change that. And also, inside the housing, you can't put more teeth on the ring gear because it'll get larger this way and it'll interfere with the housing. So the Dana 44, for example, practically every ratio has between 39 and 41 teeth on the ring gear. A couple of the really weird ratios go up to like 42 teeth, but for the most part, that's why the pinions will get smaller. The ring gear stays relatively the same number of teeth, and the pinion gets smaller, and that's why the ring gear gets thicker, is to move it closer. And that's also why you have specific steps of gear, ratios. That's why it goes in ratios like 3.73, 3.92, 4.09/410, whatever you want to call it, 4.27/4.30, depending on what you want to call it. It's because it's what you're able to do with the limited number of teeth on the ring gear. You're limited to, they're all about the same, they're not going to be able to change the size of the cut of the teeth. So you can really only change it a little bit. And so that's why you're limited to the number of teeth you can put on the ring gear in the first place. And so you're just kind of limited to what ratios work out with the number of teeth that will work on a ring gear with the cut of the teeth and size, and what that equates to with changing the number of teeth on the pinion gear. Okay, I'm going to bring it up. I brought it up in this other video here, where I was talking about high pinion axles and all the downsides of a high pinion axle. But the high pinion has a benefit to it, okay? In fact, you can actually see it when you look at these two pinions. You may notice that they actually spiral opposite directions. They have the same cut, but they're spiral opposite directions. And that's because one is a high pinion Dana 44 and one is a low pinion 44. And that's because a gear has a drive side and a coast side. Okay? So I'll just see here. So if you look, a gear has a straight side and a slant side. So a low pinion in the front is driving the front on the slant side. A high pinion in the front is driving the front from the square side. And that's another thing. Luckily, we've moved past it, but 20 years ago, we saw this a lot, where guys were thinking it was some upgrade to have custom rear housings made with high pinion centers. So they'd take like a high pinion 44 or 60 center and then tube it for a rear axle. And it was like, why are you doing that? To move your drive shaft up? Okay. But you're now driving it on, because when you flip it around and put it in the rear now it's driving on the wrong side. High pinions are only stronger in the front, and they're not even that much stronger. People are like, it's 30% stronger, or it's blank stronger. That's all, estimation. There is no defined strength difference. There's no way of really measuring that without doing some massive calculations, and no one's done it. So that's another thing, is that people, they estimate to be 30% stronger, but just, food for thought as we're talking about it. And this video is more talking about, in general, generalizations of gear changes. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about the Tahoe overlanding axle swap, but you guys know that's what we focus on this channel here. So obviously I'm going to talk about it. And that being said, funny thing, the Tahoe overlanding Proto, the blue Tahoe, I've wheeled the hell out of that thing. And it's got 35s on it right now. It still has 373 gears in it, because it hasn't been enough of an issue to change the gears yet. And I have the skills, the tools, the ability to put gears in pretty easily. And I still haven't done it. So that other discussion is, don't do something you don't need yet. So if you're doing okay, don't gear it unless you really feel like you need to. Now, don't get me wrong. If I had the time and I just, wanted to, I would probably re-gear it. I love it and I wheel it, and I don't want to take the truck down to put gears in it. It's been such a reliable, fun off-roader that I use several times a month that I see no point. It works great. I'm going to leave it alone. Gearing your differential lower will not hurt your fuel economy. In fact, it'll probably help it. Everybody that has ever contacted me about gear ratio has said, well, with blank ratio, I will be at blank RPM at 65 miles an hour. Every single one of them. I'm serious. And it's like, okay, that's fair. You will be at that RPM. But the RPM is not the important part, okay? You are going to find that your fuel economy is going to get better if you are using less throttle position, less gas pedal, because with a gear reduction, you will have a less engine load, and therefore you'll use less of that skinny pedal. Fuel economy is more affected by throttle position than it is basically everything else. And when you have a taller gear ratio in your differential, you have to use more gas pedal to get up to speed, to maintain speed, and you are using more fuel in that way. So yeah, you'll be at a higher RPM, but you won't be using as much fuel at that RPM as you do even at a lower RPM with more gas pedal. Thanks for watching.